Okay, good morning. So for today, we will be discussing about the environmental awareness and protection in the national security that concerns our peace and order. So for this lesson, we will be discussing one of the pressing issue of our society, and that is our environmental protection and the solid waste management. So maintaining a balanced environment is essential to the continuance of life. When we destroy or allow the destruction of the environment, we contribute to the destruction of all life forms here on Earth. It has been said that saving the world ought to be paramount to every human who wants to stay alive for a longer time to serve his purpose, to treasure his wealth, to explore his knowledge, or even simply to live his life the way he wants it to be. Saving the world in its physical structure is more than a socio-political responsibility because the spiritual connection of nature and life transcends mere obligations of humans to nature, but rather such connection impresses the continuity of life in nature being conceived as one and the same. Hence, saving the world in its physical structure, also known as environment, ought to be personal and a moral matter every rational person must engage himself in. So, though we all know that humans undeniably are one of the reasons for the world's destruction and possible extinction of our natural resources, so humans also hold the key to some viable solutions confronting the problems of the world's survival. So there are pressing environmental problems that need our immediate understanding and attention, and we will be discussing those. And ilan sa mga mababanggit here on our module is the climate change, as well as the scarcity of our water resources, and yun nga sinabi ko kanina na solid waste management. So in our own simple ways, awareness is a preliminary step in fighting for the world's survival, which in the end is our very own survival too. So our environment refers to the everything that surrounds us. It includes the natural world as well as the things that produced by human. And the study of our environment as well as the living organism that interact to this is what we call the science of ecology. And part of our environment class is yung tinatawag natin na ecosystem or the relationship, particularly symbiotic relationship between the organism and the species within a particular community or a particular area in which they depend on one another in order to support the continuance of life. So kaya class, kailangan talaga natin pag-aralan ano-ano ba yung mga pwedeng solutions or mitigations to do in order for us to save our Mother Earth or to save our environment. So for today, we will be expected to illustrate our kind of environment at the present to determine the factors in affecting the cleanliness of our environment and suggest ways on how to contribute on saving our nature or our Mother Earth. So, let us discuss first our physical environment. So, our physical environment has been described to have our land, our air, water, plants, and animals. So you can also see here buildings, infrastructure, and other natural resources that provide our basic needs and opportunities for social and economic development. So if you are going to notice class, those things that I have mentioned are what? They are tangible ones and people can touch. Those uh, physical characteristic of environment that I have mentioned to you. So a clean, healthy environment is important for people's physical and emotional well-being. So that is the benefit of our environment. So if we continuously na pinanatili natin ito na malinis, healthy yung environment, so what is the resultant? So since there is an interaction between the environment and its organism, so as a people, so we what? We also develop our physical and emotional well-being. So, one of the problems, the pressing problems of our society, when it comes on environmental protection and awareness class is yung tinatawag na nating climate change. So this is, sabi nga, this is one of the most pressing environmental issue in the world. So the extreme weather conditions are manifested by the rising temperatures in summers and the fading coldness in winters. Frequencies of hotter days and nights, fatal and damaging typhoons with occasional and phenomenal windstorms, and the El Nino event and the La Nina event, that we are experiencing on several regions. So all these various sectors, like say for example, our agricultural, freshwater, coastal, and marine resources in health, is related, or kumbaga meron tayong mga nakikitang pagbabago dito, because of the climate change. So the entire world is affected by the climate change. And global climate change has already resulted in a wide range of impacts across every region of the country. And it somehow also influences not only those different parts of the country but also the many sectors of our economy. Say just say for example, the last typhoon, the typhoon Rolly and the typhoon Quinta that we have experienced here in the Philippines, so masasabi natin that those typhoons are product of the climate changes, so next on that, so thousands of studies conducted by researchers around the world have documented increase in temperature on our Earth's surface as well as on our atmosphere. And human activities also contributed doon sa pagtaas ng klima on our environment. So especially the emissions of these greenhouse gases from the fossil fuel combustion to the deforestation activity and land use change are the primary driver of the climate changes observed in the industrial era. So class yung mga natin, mga factory natin, nag-i-emit yun ng mga gases, that is very bad, on our air as well as on our environment. And the deforestation or the illegal logging activity of man has also contributed to the climate change. So the largest contributor to human caused warming has increased by about 40% over the industrial era. This change has intensified the natural greenhouse effect, driving an increase in global surface temperatures and other widespread changes in Earth's climate that are unprecedented in the history of the modern civilization. Next on that, so greenhouse gas emissions from human activities will continue to affect our Earth's climate for decades and even centuries. And now humans are adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere at a rate far greater than it is removed by natural process, creating a long-lived reservoir of the gas in the atmosphere and ocean that is driving the climate to a warmer and warmer state. So it's because of the activity of man, that is why kaya maraming carbon dioxide yung nasasama sa ating mga hangin, And aside from that, so climate change in the Philippine context is really a pressing issue, when it comes on environmental awareness and protection. So we all know that as of today, di ba, do sa mga discussions natin, that the Philippines is located on the Pacific Ring of Fire. And somehow our geographical location has something to do kung bakit tayo vinivisit ng mga malalakas na typhoon. But also, this phenomenon also are the resultant of the effects of climate change. So kaya nakakaranas tayo ng mga category 5 intensity of hurricane or super typhoons. So these typhoons have what? Have a massive effect on our environment as well as on our economy. And this has been proven from the 1980s to 2010s, that the typhoon seasons in the Philippines had brought more deaths and damages on our agriculture as well as on our infrastructure. So actually, Mindanao, being considered as a typhoon-free daw, is now frequently visited by typhoons. And the two deadliest typhoon that visited our country in the 2010 is the Sendong and Pablo that devastated the Mindanao region. In the recently nga, Luzon has been visited ng mga sunod-sunod na bagyo in the name of Rolly and Quinta. Okay? So next on that, So another information pa, so according to the Global Climate Risk Index, so the Philippines is among the top 5 countries that are most affected by climate change. And you see class, so we belong on the top 5. So meaning to say, the people living on the Philippine region is very undisciplined when it comes on the illegal activities such as mining, deforestation, and doon sa hindi tamang pagtatapon natin ng basura sa kapaligiran. So a study conducted by Asian Development Bank has also estimated that by 2100, so the average cost of climate change to the country would equal losing 6% of its gross domestic product each year, which is more than twice the global average loss. So the same study conducted by ADB estimated that by investing 0.5% of the Philippines GDP each year until 2020 in climate change adaptation, the country may avert losses equaling up to 4% of its GDP by 2100. Okay? So, what are the plans of the government in order to combat this climate change na nararanasan natin sa Pilipinas? So, the Presidential Task Force on Climate Change have proposed the following solution. So, consumers may do their share through climate-friendly energy supply mix, energy generation, and energy efficiency adaptation. So, this is the reason class, kaya yung mga manufacturing industry natin, yung mga industrial industries natin, sila ay merong mga program, for or project implementation on saving our environment. So sila ay nakikilahok, sa mga ganitong gawin in order to save our environment. So policy incentives for renewable energy schemes and climate-friendly technologies must be made, and subsidies for lowering cost per power generation using solar, wind, and any nature-based related technologies must be given. So this is also the reason class why lalong-lalo na yung mga environmental advocates, many companies or large companies on Philippines is advocating on the use of what? Solar energies and wind energies. So aside from that, the government has also done several laws, that will cater the problem on climate change, or that will support environmental awareness. So we do have in 2009 your Republic Act 9729, or the Climate Change Act, enacted into law. So the law mandates the mainstreaming climate change considerations into government policy and planning. So as a signatory, so global agreements related to climate change such as the Paris Agreement, the Philippines has submitted its intended nationally determined contribution that is to be finalized internationally determined contribution. Okay? So, meron tayo pa class sinatawag ng Philippine Clean Air Act. So, which includes the different program and policies that we must do in order to what? To protect our environment against the too much temperature from our human activities. So, aside from that, so kasama din do sa responses natin yung Executive Order 43 Series of 2011 created the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation. So, the creation of the Cabinet Cluster aimed to facilitate coordination among national government agencies, the local government units, and other stakeholders on CC adaptation and mitigation measures. So, DENR is the lead agency in protecting our environment. Okay? So, the Climate Change Act, the NFSCC, the NCCAP, the Cabinet Cluster of CCAFDRR, and the NBM 114 and 118 have designated the responsibility to the DENR. So, our Department of Environmental and Natural Resources. So, the task of this agency is to oversee the implementation of the program convergence budgeting for the said cluster. So, adaptation pillar number 9 of the NFSCC is within the purview of the DENR's mandate. And the said pillar includes integrated ecosystem-based management and water governance and management. Section 15 of the Climate Change Act tasks the DENR with the creation of a climate change information management. So aside from that, so the climate change service of the DENR answers the need for a unit within the department that will focus on and address these needs. Okay? So the climate change service facilitates the harmonious coordination and overall direction in the implementation of mandated CC functions of DENR, interbureaus and offices, better secretariat work relative to the cabinet cluster on CCAM DRR, and the effective and efficient integration and implementation of the risk resiliency program and risk resiliency and sustainability program, among others. So those are the different government responses and the laws created by our government in order to combat climate change. So aside from that, so there is also the enactment of RA 10 121. So worthy to note the growing awareness of people on different effects and dangers of calamities and disasters. So isa pa yun sa inimplement na batas. So this ordinance or this law includes education on the disaster risk reduction in schools. So kasama din dito yung mga sangguniang kabataan programs and public sector employees. So this is way of our national disaster agency to coordinate to government agencies to act on every calamity. And every yung mga pangyayari or situations wherein ang mga kababayan natin ay nakakaranas ng disaster. So this includes the preparation, mitigation, the emergency responses, and the post-disaster rehabilitation of the victims of different areas or region. Another environmental problem class that we do have is the water pollution or the scarcity of our water resources. So we said that water is the primary and the most consumed commodity in the world. So up to this date, only 2% of the water available in the planet is pure and fit for human consumption. Too much of water or too little of it both cause a problem. So a great majority of population in the urban areas are experiencing water scarcity, resorts to rainfalls as an alternative water source. So water is an organic, transparent, tasteless, odorless, and nearly colorless chemical substance. But napakadami ng gamit ng ating water because it's very vital for all the life of the species and organism na nabubuhay on earth. So but as of today nga ay isa sa problema din ng Pilipinas class ay ang unti-unting pagkaubos ng ating water resources. So according to a report released by the Asian Development Bank, heavy and organic pollutants have made water increasingly a threat to life. And aside from that, so the Philippines is a developing country that is also undergoing rapid urbanization and industrialization. So out of more than 100 million Filipinos, 9 million rely on unsafe water supply. So in fact, water pollution in the Philippines and a lack of proper sewage kills 55 people every day. So the UNICEF's Water Sanitation and Hygiene Program in the Philippines notes that access to adequate sanitation facilities is a problem to more than 30 million Filipinos. So yun yung ating problema dito sa Pilipinas. So the water that we are using are unsafe because of the pollutants that are there, and aside from that, there is a problem on the access for our water, and there is no sanitation facilities for our water consumption, which makes water as a threat for our life. Okay, so the said option poses health hazards unknown to many people dependent on water consumption. So yung iba pa nga class, 'di ba? So ang ginagamit nila na tubig because nga kulang sa kanila ay umaasa sila dun sa tubig ulan. So however, there are studies saying that rain have harmful levels of chemicals such as sulfur and nitrogen oxide, causing what we now know as acid rain. So because of those rainfall, yung ating mga tubig ulan ngayon ay hindi kasing linis. Nung ulan na meron nung mga unang panahon o nung panahon ng mga lolo't lola natin, very acidic yung tubig natin. So, this also poses a threat to the life of our kababayans or ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino. So, this portion of the population is forced to spend considerable time, effort, and energy in procuring water. Families without a sanitary toilet often face the embarrassment of venturing outside to relieve themselves. Some resort to asking their neighbors to utilize their sanitary toilet facilities. Environmental group Greenpeace has previously warned that Filipinos in key agricultural areas are drinking water contaminated with nitrates. So, a study on farming areas, Greenpeace warned that nitrate levels were alarmingly above the safety limits set by the World Health Organization. The group also noted that drinking water from 30% of all groundwater was sampled in the Philippines and Thailand showed nitrate levels above the WHO safety limit of 50 mg 1-1 of nitrate. So class, kung inyong mapapansin, hindi ganun talaga ka-safe ang tubig na meron tayo dito sa Pilipinas as said by the following by the previous study that has been conducted. So another major concern when it comes on our water kasi class, so there is a directly linked to this environmental concern is the access to potable water. Waterborne diseases are prevalent nowadays. Those diseases are caused by bacteria that survive in and transmitted through untreated water supply. Not only areas which are severely congested and polluted are prone to have a scarcity of potable water. So some places surrounded by or within the proximate vicinity of mining industries or metallurgical plants also suffer on the same fate. So kasi class, yung mga kalimitan, yung mga bahay natin dito sa Pilipinas, so malapit tayo doon sa mga industrial companies, most lalo na yung mga nakatira on urban areas. So kaya talaga yung mga source nila of potable water ay hindi ganon ka-adequate and yung access sa mga potable water ay very limited. Okay? So due to water pollution in the Philippines, the country is likely to face a shortage of water for sanitation, drinking, agriculture, and industrial purposes. In an Asia Development Bank report, the Philippines Regional Group, which includes Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, has made gains in improving water security. However, the region is home to a sixth of the global population and the poorest people in the world. With agriculture consuming a staggering 80% of region's water, the region is a global hotspot for water insecurity. So water conservation efforts in the Philippines by many local and international companies have protected the water supplies for future use. So ito yung class yung mga dahilan kung bakit nagkakaroon tayo ng mga seminars or trainings specifically dun din sa mga companies and industrial and manufacturing companies as well as also in schools on how what are the different tips on how we can na matitipid natin yung mga water natin consumption. So the Coca-Cola has pledged nearly $1.4 million for a 5-year project with the World Wildlife Fund to protect the capital's drinking water source, the Ipo watershed. So the Cement Manufacturers Association of the Philippines, an industry that heavily uses water, has started initiative to capture and utilize rainwater for many production needs. So yun ay ilan lamang sa mga example na ginagawa ng mga private sectors in order to combat yung problema natin on water shortage. So, the two given a problem for this lesson or for this presentation has something to do with dun sa wag nating problema ng ating environment, the air pollution and the water pollution. So you have been given there the different ways on how we could prevent, and I know that you also have been thinking today the different tips that you could do in order to conserve water and in order to protect our environment. So kaya class, isang napakagandang activity natin, 'di ba, nung nagkaroon tayo ng coastal project plan, that sana ang inyong activity ay you plant more trees because it really helps our environment. And aside from that, on our simple deeds at home, yung mga pagtitipid natin ng tubig, pagtitipid natin ng electricity, and if we can really use electricity that are powered by solar and wind energy, so malaking benefits yun in order for our environment to be na maubutan pa nung mga successive or nung mga susunod na generation to us. So let us protect and save our environment.